Now, Monday marked the end of the third straight month in Hong Kong's summer of protest. A controversial China extradition bill first lit the match of anger that has now exploded into million-person marches and the 5 demands made by the pro-democracy movement. To help us put things into perspective, joining me live via Skype from Hong Kong is Dr. Victor Ta, professor at the University of Hong Kong. Victor, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, after months of protests and unrest in Hong Kong, we saw a stunning U-turn by Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie in officially withdrawing this extradition bill. Now, there are plenty of wild speculation. Was this a concession from the Hong Kong government or Beijing, or was it a strategic adjustment paving the way for tougher action if this chaos continued?
I think it's a gesture on the part of the establishment to try and not give in, but to try and offer a concession to the protesters. I do not see it as a gesture of the government being tougher on the protesters, because what happened over the weekend was that the protesters came out and they did more damages to the various metro stations. And even though the riot police had gone in to try and stop them, they used basically the same level of force. There was nobody shot. So I think the Hong Kong police is still trying to contain the situation. There isn't actually a major escalation in the way the police uses force over this past weekend.
Now, former U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis has said that the anti-government protests in Hong Kong were not an internal Chinese matter and that the U.S. should offer at least moral support to the demonstrators. Political analysts suggest his response was, now President Trump's response was muted to avoid disrupting talks with China over tariff war. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there are multiple perspectives to this. First of all, with all due respect to the Secretary of Defense, this really is an issue for mainly for between the Hong Kong people and the Chinese government as well as the Hong Kong government to sort out. It really, I think, has nothing to do with the United States. Having said that, I think there is a general consensus, a global consensus for the support of global liberties. I think most people in Hong Kong that are marching are for civil liberties. I myself included, who will be against civil liberties? The big question is how. So what I'm saying is that there is a support for the protesters' aspirations, meaning they would like to have, more democratic accountability, more civil liberties, human rights to be upheld. The big question is the methodology behind the different sectors of the different groups of protesters. Obviously, the main group of protesters in Hong Kong, they are the peace-loving citizens, but there is a small group that are very radical. They are bent on drawing in the United States into what is supposed to be a domestic discussion for the Chinese and the Hong Kong people. They are bent on using what they call civil disobedience, which essentially is, I think, violence. They are bent on drawing in the kids in school. 12, 13-year-old kids who are supposed to be studying into their movement, and this has the protest has morphed into different directions for different groups of people in Hong Kong.
Well, the protests in Hong Kong were sparked by the government intro of an extradition bill to mainland China. So despite the withdrawal, the protests continue. It's been a little over 20 years since Britain's return of Hong Kong to China and the beginning of one country, two systems. Now, do you believe this is the beginning of something bigger, a bigger demand by the people of Hong Kong, the breakdown of one country, two systems, perhaps?
No, actually, in fact, if anything, the number of people coming onto the streets to protest is an indication that most people believe in the one country, two systems. I've always been telling my students for years, if you do not believe in one country, two systems, and you believe that Hong Kong is like China, then there is the big question of whether the students would actually dare to go and protest out in the streets. I don't think Beijing University students would actually dare to do what the Hong Kong students do simply because they know what the consequences are. They have this belief that the police there will use force, lethal force if necessary. Hong Kong students don't. They don't believe the police would actually use lethal force on them, and that's the whole reason why everybody is out in the streets. It does, however, represent a turning point, a major turning point in Hong Kong politics, and that is the willingness of a new generation of Hong Kong people coming to the streets to make or press for greater political demands on not only the Hong Kong government, but also directly challenge the central government. It also increasingly, the protest is actually shifting its nature. From discussions of democratic accountability, now there are cries for Hong Kong to be independent. So we're seeing a more sinister turn in Hong Kong politics. Having said that, I think the one country, two system is still very much alive in Hong Kong and China today.
All right, so you're in belief of the one country, two systems. All right, Victor Ta, professor at the University of Hong Kong, many thanks for your insights today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.